I was elbow-deep in chicken feed when the deputy cruiser rolled up my gravel driveway like it owned the place. 2 officers, lights off. No sirens, just the quiet kind of pull-up that says, "We're not here to chat." I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped onto the porch as the taller one got out, clipboard in hand. "You Jackson Ryder?" he asked, like he hadn't just driven past a mailbox with my name painted on it in red block letters. "That's me," I said. "And you're trespassing." The shorter one shifted behind him. Young guy, nervous eyes, probably fresh from the academy and still thinking this was a routine civil check. Poor kid. The tall one, Sergeant Cobb, according to his name tag, stepped forward and handed me a folded paper. Notice of enforcement action, eviction order authorized by Meadow Ridge Homeowners Association. I blinked once, then I laughed. "You're evicting me from my own farm." He didn't smile. "Meadow Ridge filed a motion last week with the county court, claimed you're in violation of local development ordinances. They got a temporary writ to compel enforcement." I took the paper, opened it. The HOA's name was plastered across the top, along with a laundry list of fabricated offences, zoning violations, livestock hazards, fence encroachments, and, my personal favourite, non-aesthetic agricultural operations detrimental to adjacent properties. I folded it slowly and tucked it in my back pocket. "This property's been a working farm since 1962, I said, long before those vinyl roof cookie-cutter houses started popping up on the other side of the fence. And I never signed a single covenant." "Maybe so," Cobb said, "but the HOA claims the expansion zone includes your eastern field." I stepped down from the porch and got real close. Calm voice, steady eyes. "You know this is illegal." He hesitated, and that's when I smiled. "You also know my brother." His face twitched. "Sheriff Ryder?" "Yep." I pulled out my phone and hit a speed dial labeled, "Do not use unless idiots show up with badges." He picked up on the second ring. "Jack, what did they do?" "They just handed me an HOA eviction order." There was a pause. Then the unmistakable crackle of my brother's radio voice through Cobb's shoulder mic. "Sergeant, this is Sheriff Ryder. You and your rookie are to leave that property immediately." Cobb's eyes widened. "Now." Cobb stiffened like someone had snapped a ruler across his spine. He reached for his shoulder radio, the color draining from his face. "Sheriff Ryder, this is Sergeant Cobb. We were acting on what we believed to be a lawful order. You were acting on a civil motion pushed through by a private association, with no legal authority outside their own neighborhood." My brother's voice growled back. "And you just tried to enforce it with a sheriff's department badge. Do you know what that is?" There was a long pause. "Misuse of office," my brother answered for him. "You've got 60 seconds to get off my brother's land before I come down there and read you your actual rights." The radio crackled again, brief silence, and then Cobb turned to his rookie. "We're leaving, but—" the kid started. "Now." They got back in the cruiser and peeled off the property without another word. I stood on the porch, watching the dust trail rise behind them, then lifted my phone back to my ear. "Thanks, Eli. You all right?" "I'm fine." But they handed me a full-blown eviction notice with a court stamp. "Somebody pulled strings," he sighed. "Karen Thatcher?" Bingo. Karen Thatcher was president of the Meadow Ridge HOA, former real estate broker, ran her neighborhood like a fiefdom, the kind of person who thought rules were only flexible if she wrote them herself. She'd sent me letters before. Demands, really, insisting I comply with evolving HOA expectations or risk community litigation. I ignored her. Apparently, she didn't like that. "This smells like ex parte." "Nonsense," Eli said. "They got a judge to sign off without notifying you, which makes it invalid, right?" "Exactly. I'll file to vacate the order first thing tomorrow." I rubbed my jaw. "Think she'll try again?" "She doesn't know who she's messing with." That made me smile. "She's about to." The next day I showed up to the county courthouse with my boots clean and my badge. Yes, my own U.S. Marshal Service badge, long since retired, clipped inside my belt for old times' sake. Karen was there, so was her lawyer. and two other HOA board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I watched as they handed off documents and whispered like students trying to cheat the exam. They didn't see me until I stepped right up to the counter and asked to file a counter motion to dismiss based on improper service and lack of jurisdiction. Karen's head whipped around. "Excuse me, he shouldn't even be—" The clerk interrupted. "Mr. Ryder has standing. You named him on the original writ." Karen tried to smile, but it looked like she was sucking on a lemon. "Mr. Ryder, this isn't personal. We just want to ensure community standards are upheld." I leaned in close, enough that she could smell the cedar oil I used on my barn door. "You sent cops to my farm." "Deputies," she corrected, still clinging to civility, "on an illegal order." She flushed red, but said nothing. The judge, bless his common sense, agreed to an emergency hearing right then and there. Karen's lawyer sputtered. "Your Honor, we weren't prepared." "You filed an emergency eviction. I'm treating it like one," Judge Morrison said sharply. "He gave me 10 minutes to speak, so I did. I told the court about the farm, 60 years in the family, how it was zoned agricultural long before the HOA even existed, how I never signed a covenant, never joined their development, and never received proper notice about the motion. Then I pulled out a copy of the parcel maps. "Here," I said, pointing to the edge, "this is my fence line, their expansion. Zone doesn't exist on any county record. It's a fantasy map drawn by their private contractor." The judge looked at Karen's lawyer. "Is this accurate?" The man stammered, but before he could speak I added, "Oh, and when they came to serve the order, they used Sheriff's Department personnel without a valid county directive. The only reason they left without escalating was because the sheriff himself called them off." Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Your Honor," Karen's lawyer said weakly, "we were told Mr. Ryder was cooperative but combative." "I was cooperative," I said, "until they tried to handcuff me for owning a tractor." The courtroom chuckled. Morrison didn't. "This case is dismissed, effective immediately, writ vacated, motion denied." He banged the gavel before Karen could open her mouth. Afterward, I stepped outside and found a small crowd waiting, mostly local folks. A few gave me thumbs up. One even clapped. Word had gotten around. Karen stormed past, eyes locked straight. Ahead, jaw clenched. But I wasn't done with her yet, because when people send cops to your door without cause, it's not just personal, it's war. Karen thought it was over, that her stunt in court, though a failed ambush, was the worst of it. But that's where she underestimated me. She didn't know that growing up with a brother who became sheriff and a father who spent 30 years in property law had its advantages. So I did what any wronged countryman with time and motivation would do. I started digging. Within a week, I'd found enough dirt on the Meadow Ridge HOA to bury a small-town mayor. For starters, the expansion zone Karen claimed gave her board power over my land. It was a development pitch, just a hypothetical, rejected by the county zoning. A board 2 years ago. She'd pulled it from an unapproved blueprint filed with her developer buddy. Then there were the finances. The HOA's annual budget was bloated. Absurd, really. Over $150,000 in fees collected from residents, yet no record of how most of it was being spent. When I tracked the vendor accounts, guess what I found? Karen's husband owned the landscaping company that got the largest monthly contract. Her cousin, he owned the compliance patrol service that billed for vehicle fuel and fake citation reviews. And the attorney who filed the motion against me, turns out he wasn't even licensed in the county. That was enough. I compiled a full report, documents, spreadsheets, photos of the fake property maps, and handed it all to my brother. Eli raised an eyebrow as he flipped through it. "You sure you don't want to run for council instead of blowing up a whole HOA?" "Nope," I said. "I want her investigated, charged, and replaced." "You'll get at least one of those." The audit went public 2 weeks later. County investigators showed up at the Meadow Ridge HOA offices with a warrant and walked out. With 2 bankers' boxes full of records, by sundown, the neighborhood Facebook group was on fire. Why did they show up with badges? Who the hell approved $9,000 for mulch studies? Wait, Karen's husband runs the groundskeeping. Neighbors started knocking on doors, organizing, asking real questions. For the first time in years, Karen couldn't hide behind bylaws and threats, and then someone found the drone footage. A neighbor, one of the quiet ones, a retired engineer, had been running a drone for fun. One day, his footage captured Karen, standing with her compliance patrol guy, pointing toward my property and laughing. "Just wait," she'd said. "He won't even see it coming." That clip went viral, and just like that, she lost whatever goodwill she had left. I didn't celebrate, not really, but I did replace the old wooden gate on my farm's south fence with a steel one and hung a small metal sign beside it. It read, "Private property, not subject to HOA, sheriff approved." Neighbors drove by just to take photos. A few even honked. Karen stayed out of sight for a while. Rumor was she'd lawyered up and was taking a break from board duties. But accountability moves fast when you drag a badge where it doesn't belong. By the end of the month, a civil grand jury was reviewing fraud charges. The county had frozen the HOA's discretionary funds, and a group of residents, led by a former firefighter and a very angry stay-at-home dad, had started a petition to dissolve the entire board. The petition got 104 signatures in 3 days. That was 70% of the neighborhood. Karen. She tried to organize a town hall to rebuild trust. Only 6 people showed up. 3 of them brought resignation letters. Back at the farm, things finally quieted down. I planted a new row of cedar along the eastern property line, right where the Meadow Ridge buffer zone used to be. My chickens clucked in peace. The cattle grazed with not a single HOA rulebook in sight. My brother stopped by one evening with a 6-pack and a grin. "You torched their little empire, you know." "I didn't torch it," I said. "I just let it collapse under its own lies." He laughed. "You should have been a cop." I took a long drink. "Nah, too many rules." ChatGPT said, "Here is part 4 of HOA sent cops to evict me from my farm. But my brother is the sheriff." Continuing with another 1,000 words. The fallout spreads, and the community starts to turn the page. Karen finally resigned, officially on the 3rd Monday of the month. The announcement came in a formal HOA email with the subject line, "Leadership Transition for the Future of Meadow Ridge." No apology, no acknowledgement of the investigation, just a thin paragraph about personal circumstances and stepping away to focus on family. Nobody bought it, but everyone welcomed it. By the time she packed up her things and left the HOA office, most of the community had already voted to freeze all enforcement activity pending reorganization. The board was gutted, her inner circle dissolved like sugar in hot coffee, and all those letters she used to send, they became collector's items, framed sarcastically by residents who'd once lived in fear of her clipboard. As for the fake eviction attempt, the sheriff's office filed a formal reprimand against Sergeant Cobb, and the rookie was reassigned to traffic duty. No criminal charges, but a clear message was sent. Don't act like a tool for anyone's personal vendetta, especially not when the land in question belongs to the sheriff's brother. I stayed quiet, didn't parade around, didn't gloat. But the next time I was in town, someone behind me in line at the hardware store tapped my shoulder. "You're the one who stood up to the HOA, right?" I turned. The man wore overalls, maybe late 50s. He looked tired but grateful. "I got fined 5 times last year," he said, "for having a rain barrel, a freaking rain barrel, after what you did. I just installed a second one." He reached out and shook my hand. "Appreciate you." With Karen gone, Meadow Ridge held new elections. This time, they opened the floor to everyone. Renters, non-board members, even folks like me, who weren't under their jurisdiction but had every reason to care. I declined the invitation to run, of course. I don't do committees, but I did show up to their first open forum, sat in the back, listened, and what I heard was different. People weren't afraid anymore. They asked real questions. They proposed practical changes, like turning the old HOA office into a shared garden space. 1. Woman volunteered to create a neighborhood directory. A teenager asked if he could paint a mural on the east wall of the cul-de-sac. Nobody shot them down. Nobody cited a bylaw. The new board, 4 men and 3 women, nodded, took notes, and even smiled. Karen's rulebook had been burned. Now they were building something better. One morning, about a month later, I saw a pickup truck pull into my driveway. Out stepped a woman I hadn't seen since the trial. Karen. She wasn't wearing heels or sunglasses. No clipboard, just jeans, a plain shirt, and a nervous look that reminded me of a kid walking into the principal's office. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. "I'm not here to argue," she said. I nodded. I lost sight of what mattered. I thought I was protecting something. "You weren't," I said flatly. "I know." Her voice dropped. I forgot what it meant to have neighbors, not subjects. That caught me off guard. "I'm leaving town," she added. "House is up for sale. My husband already moved out. Thought you should hear it from me." I didn't soften, but I didn't gloat either. "Hope you learned something from all this," I said. "I already have." Then she turned, climbed back into her truck, and left. No tears, no excuses, just silence. Here is part 5, the final chapter of HOA Sent Cops to Evict Me from my farm, but my brother is the sheriff. Completing the 5,000-word story with closure, reflection, and justice earned. Fall settled in over the valley with that quiet, golden kind of peace you only get after a long, hot storm. The fields glowed under the October sun. My chickens fattened up for winter. The new cedar trees along the eastern fence line grew straighter each day, almost like they knew the HOA no longer loomed over them. It was over. The last of Karen's signs were pulled out by volunteers. The HOA building, stripped of the vinyl, lettering, and repurposed into a free community shed for gardening tools and outdoor supplies. They even let that teenager finish his mural. Turned out better than anyone expected. A big open landscape with a winding road and one small farmhouse sitting proud at the edge. I didn't ask, but it sure looked like mine. The county prosecutor ended up filing formal charges against Karen after all. Fraud, abuse of process, malicious, misrepresentation. She took a plea deal, 2 years probation, heavy fines, and a permanent ban from holding any HOA or neighborhood leadership position ever again. Last I heard, she moved to Arizona, bought a condo in a gated community. She's probably sending complaint emails about pool furniture by now. As for me, I kept doing what I'd always done. Woke up early, fed the animals, repaired fence posts, read on the porch with my coffee and boots propped up on the railing. But now something had changed. People dropped by more often, sometimes just to say thanks, sometimes to ask for help. One neighbor wanted advice on planting wildflowers. Another asked how to deal with a boundary dispute without starting a war. I didn't give them lectures. I gave them rope, boards, and sometimes a toolbox. Because in the end, that's how you build a real community, not through power, through presence. Eli, my brother the sheriff, showed up one afternoon with his patrol car and a smirk on his face. "Thought I'd check in on the most famous man in the county," he said, handing me a sandwich. "You're only here for the fresh eggs." All so true. We sat there for a while, watching the breeze rustle through the rows of hay and the new steel gate swinging slowly on its hinges. "You really gonna stay here forever?" he asked. "Where else would I go?" He smiled. "Just figured one day you'd want something quieter." I looked around at the open fields, the windmills spinning lazily in the sun, the distant hum of tractors from friendly neighbors who'd stopped being afraid. "This is quiet," I said. He nodded, and we didn't talk much after that. Didn't. Need to. The farm still stands, so do I, and on the post by the main entrance, right next to the American flag, I hung a new wooden sign, hand-carved, sanded smooth, painted with care. It reads, "This land was never part of your HOA. It never will be, and next time the sheriff won't be my brother. He'll be yours." No one's ever tried to cross that line again, because in this town, people remember stories, and mine is one they'll never forget.